afternoon. Ms. Carr, we'll start with you with your oral statement, please. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you, and may I first acknowledge that these hearings are being conducted on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I would also like to note that it would be better for democracy if the public were allowed to attend these hearings in person. And I believe it would be better for Canada if you had extended the mandate of your hearings to deal with how this project will exacerbate global climate change. The considerations of impacts on global climate change alone would be sufficient enough to reject this proposal. My name is Adriane Carr. I was born in Vancouver. I have a background in academia, teaching geography at Langara College, in environmental advocacy, helping my husband, Paul George, grow the group that he founded with the Wilderness Committee into Canada's largest membership-based wilderness conservation group, and in politics, co-founding the first Green Party in North America and leading it for many years, the Green Party of BC, being the deputy leader of the Green Party of Canada, and now being the first elected Green Party councillor in the city of Vancouver. I'm speaking to you as an individual citizen of Canada and a resident of Vancouver. I've been lucky enough to visit much of British Columbia, including the central interior from the Peace River to Prince Rupert, Kitimat, and the Central Coast, the Great Bear Rainforest. I've kayaked a number of times in Haida Gwaii, and been on boats, navigating the narrow coastal passages of the Mid-Coast, guided by First Nations to places of deep historical, ecological, and spiritual significance. And I have been profoundly affected by those experiences. I've been shaped by spending my childhood summers playing on the beaches and exploring the tide pools of Stanley Park, regularly eating the fish caught by my grandfather, a West Coast salmon fisherman, wading up streams in BC's interior with my dad, fishing for trout, and reassuring my son, who, as generations would have it, also loves to fish, who said to me when he was little, "Mom, I'm so worried that I will never be able to catch a salmon because they're gone." I told him that I will do everything I can to ensure that the salmon survive, to protect the bounty and beauty of this magnificent coast and province. That's why I'm here today. All environmental reviews are about weighing risks. What is the risk of significant adverse environmental impact? Can that risk be mitigated? And in the ultimate decision about whether to proceed, is the risk of adverse effects justifiable? In my mind, the more precious that which will be affected, the more severe the potential environmental impact, the less acceptable the risk, even if that risk is very low. And I will give you a very personal experience of this. 29 years ago, when I was in the 29th week of my pregnancy with my first child, I developed acute appendicitis. The doctor explained that the risk of my appendix bursting was low, but essentially unpredictable. However, if it burst, the risk of losing my unborn child was high. The only mitigative measure was to remove the risk, i.e. to remove the appendix, and I immediately said yes to that operation. My child was far too precious to avoid, to have that risk. First, I believe you need to assess what is the risk. And I believe you have received unbelievable testimony on this, profoundly moving. Information about the rich and the precious natural ecosystems, unique species, the salmon, the whales, the wildlife, the aquatic species, the marine environments, the importance of First Nations territories, the livelihoods in fishing, tourism, and other industries dependent on these biologically rich environments. I think those values are priceless. I will add perhaps something that you haven't been informed yet, that when I was the head of the Wilderness Committee's International Wild Campaign, which had a mission to map and protect the large remaining tracts of wilderness planet-wide, we published a mapping project in 1992 that revealed that most of the world's primary old-growth temperate rainforest had already been destroyed by that time. The world's biggest remaining tract of intact, old-growth, temperate rainforest was, and still is, BC's mid-coast, the Great Bear Rainforest. This is undeniably an area that is rare, it is very unique, and it is globally significant. Its value, I believe, is so significant that even a very small risk, that is ecological integrity or any of its unique species could be destroyed, is not a risk worth taking. Second, I believe you need to assess the risk of the spill. I think virtually everyone agrees there is some risk. The question is, I believe, what is the probability and the potential impact of a large catastrophic risk? In my mind, the equivalent idea of the risk of losing my unborn child. All of the scientists and lay experts, some of whom have had vast experience on our coast, predict a higher probability of accidents and catastrophic spills than that predicted by industry. I caution you to remain skeptical regarding industry predictions. When the fish farming industry first started here on the coast, I was tracking its progress. And the fish farming industry predicted that the Atlantic salmon would not escape from their farms, but they did. Then they predicted that they would not survive, and they did. Then they predicted that they would not procreate, and they did. Then they predicted that a disease, the sea lice, prevalent in fish farms, would not transfer to the wild salmon to negatively affect them, but they did. I urge you to heed most the testimony of those without vested economic interest in this project going forward. Third, I believe you need to assess the effectiveness of mitigative efforts. I believe you've heard that diluted bitumen, due to its corrosiveness in a pipeline and density in water, poses greater challenges than other forms of oil being transported. The evidence presented to you also indicates that bitumen simply can't be cleaned up as effectively or as thoroughly. And the levels of cleanup, I think, are being predicted at very low levels, 10%, 15% potential in the best of all circumstances cleanup. That still leaves a lot of bitumen out there to have lasting effect on the natural ecosystems. You've heard even after a cleanup of a regular spill, such as the Prince William Sound, regular but horrific spill, Prince William Sound and the Exxon Valdez, there are long-lasting negative impacts. Whale pods that are not reproducing, for example. It's impossible, you've heard, literally impossible to mitigate against human error, which is the greatest of all risks, challenging geography, unexpected extreme storms. The only truly effective mitigative measure to ensure that the precious environments through which this pipeline and the tankers would run would remain naturally rich and abundant is to say no to the pipelines and the tankers. Was that a 3-minute warning that I had? I'm heartened by the letter that your panel sent to EcoJustice dated January 31st, 2012, in which you stated your unequivocal commitment to impartiality in these hearings, and the fact that you would base your conclusions on the evidence presented to you. I'm also heartened by the fact that 100% of the 253 oral presentations in Victoria were against this project going forward. And overall, of course, the overwhelming majority have stated to you their concern that the risks are too great, the effects too extreme and devastating, and the environment's too precious to move ahead with this project. I'm urging you to confirm people's faith in democratic process and the impartiality and fairness of these hearings, and let the people's evidence inform your own conclusions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms. Carr.